AITA for walking out of the hospital after my wife told the nurses I wasn't allowed in the delivery room. Hours later, she begged me not to leave. I never imagined the happiest day of my life would begin with a nurse looking at me like I was a complete stranger. My wife, Emily, was in labor with our first child. We had spent months preparing for this day. I painted the nursery myself. I assembled the crib 3 different times because Emily kept changing her mind about where it should go. I attended every doctor's appointment I could, learned how to swaddle a baby from YouTube videos, and even practiced installing the car seat until I could do it with my eyes closed. Everyone joked that I was more nervous than she was. Maybe they were right. At 2:17 a.m., Emily shook my shoulder. "I think it's time." My heart nearly stopped. Within 15 minutes, we were driving through empty streets toward the hospital. She squeezed my hand every few minutes during contractions. "I can't do this," she whispered. "You already are," I told her. "I've got you." She smiled weakly. Those 3 words would replay in my head for months because in the end, I didn't have her. When we reached the maternity ward, everything happened quickly. Doctors, nurses, paperwork, monitors beeping. Someone handed me a bracelet identifying me as the baby's father. I remember staring at it proudly. I thought nothing could take this moment away from me. Then a nurse walked over with an uncomfortable expression. "Sir, yes, I'm sorry, but your wife has asked that you wait outside." I laughed. "What? She doesn't want anyone in the room during delivery." I honestly thought she was joking. "My wife wants me there." The nurse looked down. She changed her mind. It felt like someone punched me in the chest. I walked into the room anyway. Emily avoided looking at me. "Is this true?" She nodded without saying a word. I need you outside." I waited for her to say she was kidding. She never did. "Did I do something wrong?" "No." "Are you angry with me?" "No." "Then why?" "I can't explain it right now." She turned her face away. The nurse gently touched my shoulder. "I'm sorry." A minute later, I was standing alone in a cold hospital hallway while strangers rushed past me. The bracelet on my wrist suddenly felt meaningless for the next 6 hours. I became the only father in the maternity ward who wasn't allowed to meet his child, and I had absolutely no idea why. The longest 6 hours of my life, the hallway outside the delivery room felt impossibly quiet, not because it actually was. Machines beeped. Nurses hurried past carrying blankets and charts. Somewhere down the hall, a newborn let out its first cry, followed by laughter and applause from a family celebrating a new life, but none of those sounds reached me. All I could hear was the question looping through my head. Why? Emily and I had been together for 8 years, married for 4. We had survived job losses, family drama, 2 cross-country moves, and a miscarriage that nearly broke us both. If anyone had asked me the week before whether I trusted my wife, I would have said yes without thinking. Now I wasn't sure what to think. A nurse offered me a cup of coffee. "You should sit down," she said kindly. I thanked her, but I couldn't. Every few minutes I stood up and paced toward the delivery room doors, hoping someone would come out and tell me there had been a mistake. No one did. Around an hour later, Emily's mom, Linda, rushed into the maternity ward. She spotted me immediately. "Where's Emily?" I pointed toward the delivery room. "They won't let me in." Her smile disappeared. "What do you mean?" "Emily told them she didn't want me there." Linda frowned. "That doesn't sound like her." "It doesn't sound like her to me either." She walked straight to the nurse's station and spoke quietly with one of the nurses. A few minutes later, she came back. "They said Emily made it very clear." I nodded. "I know." Linda sat beside me without saying another word. For the next hour, neither of us spoke. Then my phone buzzed. It was my younger sister, Megan. "Any baby news yet?" I stared at the screen for almost a minute before replying. "She's in labor. I'm waiting outside." A few seconds later, she responded. Outside the room, "Yeah, wait." By choice, I locked my phone without answering. I didn't want to explain something I didn't even understand myself. Another contraction echoed faintly through the door. Emily cried out. Instinctively, I took a step toward the room. A nurse blocked the entrance. "I'm sorry." Those 2 words were starting to make me angry. Sorry didn't change anything. Sorry didn't let me be there for my wife. Sorry didn't let me hear my daughter's first cry. For the first time that day, I felt something besides confusion. I felt hurt. Around noon, the doctor stepped into the hallway. "The baby's doing well," he said. "Can I see my wife?" "Not yet. Can I at least know if she's okay?" "She's tired, but everything is progressing normally." I thanked him, but it barely helped. Every passing minute felt like an hour. I watched other fathers walk into delivery rooms carrying snacks, rubbing their wives' backs, holding their hands. I wasn't jealous of them. I just wanted what I thought every father expected to have. The chance to be there. About 2 hours later, Linda looked at me carefully. Can I ask you something? Sure. Have you two been fighting? No. Anything unusual during the pregnancy? I thought about it. Emily had been quieter than normal. She spent longer looking in the mirror. She stopped letting me take pictures of her. Whenever I told her she looked beautiful, she'd smile, but it never seemed like she believed me. I figured it was normal pregnancy stress. Now I wasn't so sure. I don't know, I admitted. Linda sighed. Emily's always been hard on herself. What do you mean? When she was 16, she stopped eating for almost a year because someone at school called her fat. I stared at her. What, you didn't know? No, she never told you. I slowly shook my head. Linda looked genuinely surprised. I assumed she had. Suddenly, dozens of small moments from the past year started making sense. The skipped meals, the constant dieting, the panic whenever she gained even a pound. The way she'd change clothes 3 or 4 times before leaving the house. How had I missed it, or had I simply never wanted to see it? Then, at exactly 1:42 p.m., I heard it, a tiny cry. The sound I'd dreamed about for months, my daughter. Tears filled my eyes before I even realized I was crying. A nurse stepped into the hallway. You can come in now. My legs almost gave out. As I walked toward the room, I wasn't thinking about the argument. I wasn't thinking about the hurt. I only wanted to meet my little girl, but the moment I stepped inside, I noticed Emily wasn't looking at me. She was staring at the ceiling, and there were tears running silently down her face. I knew right then that whatever had happened today, this story was far from over. Meeting my daughter and losing my wife, the first thing I noticed wasn't my daughter. It was Emily. She looked exhausted, not just physically, emotionally. Her eyes were red, her cheeks were streaked with dried tears, and she couldn't bring herself to look at me. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Then the nurse placed a tiny bundle into my arms. Meet your daughter. Everything else disappeared. She was so small that I was terrified to move. Her tiny fingers wrapped around one of mine, and just like that, every painful minute I'd spent outside the delivery room faded into the background. Hi, sweetheart, I whispered. I'm your dad. She blinked slowly, completely unaware that she'd just changed my life forever. I cried, not loudly, just enough that I had to wipe my eyes before anyone noticed. The nurse smiled. She already has you wrapped around her finger. I laughed through the tears. Looks like it. For the next hour, I focused entirely on our daughter. I counted her fingers, her toes. I memorized every little feature on her face, afraid that if I blinked, I'd somehow forget the moment. Emily watched quietly from the bed. She smiled whenever I spoke to the baby. But every time our eyes met, she looked away. That hurt more than being asked to leave the delivery room. Later that evening, when the nurses took the baby for a routine checkup, we were finally alone. I pulled a chair next to her bed. Can we talk? She nodded. I took a deep breath. I need to understand. Silence. Did I do something? She shook her head. No. Then why couldn't I be there? She stared at the blanket covering her legs. I just couldn't. Emily, please, I need an answer. She closed her eyes. I was scared. Scared of what? She hesitated for so long that I thought she wasn't going to answer. Then, almost in a whisper, she said, I didn't want you to see me like that. I frowned. What do you mean? I didn't want you to see my body during labor. I blinked. Emily, I thought if you saw everything. Her voice cracked. You'd never look at me the same way again. For a moment, I honestly thought I'd misunderstood her. You're serious? She nodded without looking up. I've read stories online. What stories? Women whose husbands stopped wanting them after watching childbirth. I stared at her. You believed that? I couldn't stop thinking about it. I didn't know what to say. For months, I'd been telling her how beautiful she looked. I'd kissed the stretch marks she hated. I'd rubbed lotion on her swollen feet every night. I'd told her she was carrying our daughter and that I'd never loved her more. None of it mattered. She'd believed strangers on the internet instead of me. I would have stayed by your head, I said quietly. I wasn't trying to watch the birth like some documentary. She started crying. I know, no, I don't think you do. I do now. You shut me out on the biggest day of our lives. She covered her face with her hands. I'm sorry. I wanted to hug her. I wanted to comfort her, but I couldn't. Something inside me had cracked, not broken, just cracked. The nurse returned with our daughter before either of us said another word. The conversation ended there, but the silence between us didn't. The next 2 days in the hospital were strange. Whenever visitors came, Emily smiled. She laughed. She thanked everyone for the flowers. People kept saying, you two make such a beautiful family. We smiled for the photos. No one realized that the moment the room emptied, we barely spoke. On the drive home, our daughter slept peacefully in the back seat. Emily looked out the window. I kept both hands on the steering wheel. Neither of us said a word for almost 30 minutes. Finally, she broke the silence. "Are you angry?" I answered honestly. "I'm hurt," she nodded. "I know, I don't hate you, I know, but I don't know how to stop replaying that day in my head." She quietly turned back toward the window. Neither of us realized it then. But the hardest part of our marriage wasn't behind us. It was just beginning. The secret hidden in our home, bringing our daughter home, was supposed to be one of the happiest days of our lives. Instead, it felt like two strangers were trying to raise the same baby. We worked well as parents, as a couple, not so much. Every 3 hours, we'd wake up to feed the baby. Emily would nurse while I changed diapers, washed bottles, and rocked our daughter back to sleep whenever she became fussy. From the outside, we looked like a perfect team. But the moment the baby fell asleep, the silence returned. A week passed, then two. We hadn't had a real conversation since leaving the hospital. Whenever I tried to bring up the delivery room, Emily would say the same thing. I already apologized, but it never felt like we were talking about the same problem. She thought I was upset because I missed the birth. That wasn't the whole truth. I was hurt because she believed I would abandon her over one of the most vulnerable moments of her life. After 8 years together, that lack of trust cut deeper than anything else. One afternoon, I came home early from work. The house was unusually quiet. I expected to hear the baby crying. Instead, I found Emily standing in front of the bathroom mirror. She didn't notice I was there. She lifted her shirt slightly and stared at the loose skin on her stomach. Then she pinched it with both hands. "I hate this," she whispered to herself. A moment later, she stepped onto the bathroom scale. She checked the number, stepped off, stepped back on again. As if somehow it might change, when she saw me reflected in the mirror, she jumped. "Oh, I didn't hear you come home," I smiled gently. "You don't have to hide from me. I'm not hiding." "You are," she forced a laugh. "I'm just checking my weight." "You've checked it 3 times today." Her smile disappeared. "You've been counting." "I've been worried." She looked away. "I'm fine." I wasn't convinced. That evening, while Emily was putting the baby to sleep, I cleaned the kitchen. I opened one of the cabinets to grab some tea. Behind a stack of plates was a small notebook I'd never seen before. I wasn't trying to snoop, it simply fell onto the floor. When I picked it up, a folded receipt slipped out. It was from a nutrition store: meal replacement shakes, diet pills, fat-burning supplements, all purchased 3 weeks before Emily gave birth. My stomach tightened. I opened the notebook. It wasn't a diary, it was a weight log. Every page listed calories, daily weigh-ins, target goals. There were notes scribbled in the margins. "If I can lose 20 pounds before Christmas, maybe he'll want me again. Don't eat breakfast. Skip lunch if possible. Being hungry is temporary. Being unattractive lasts forever." I felt sick. Those weren't the thoughts of someone trying to get healthy. Those were the thoughts of someone who genuinely hated herself. I closed the notebook just as Emily walked into the kitchen. She froze. Her eyes immediately dropped to the notebook in my hands. "You read it." "I didn't mean to." "Give it back." She rushed over and grabbed it. "You shouldn't have looked." "I wasn't looking for it." "It doesn't matter." "It does matter." "No. It doesn't. It matters because you're starving yourself." "I'm not, Emily. I'm just trying to lose the baby weight." "You're barely eating." "I'm eating enough. Our daughter needs you." "Healthy? I'm healthy." I couldn't stay calm anymore. "No, you're not." The words came out louder than I intended. The baby started crying from the nursery. Emily rushed past me without another word, and for the first time. I wondered if the real problem in our marriage had nothing to do with the delivery room. It was something much deeper, something that had been quietly growing inside her for years. And neither of us knew how to fight it. The day everything exploded the next morning, I acted like nothing had happened, not because I wasn't upset, because I didn't know what to say anymore. Every conversation about Emily's health ended the same way. "I'm fine. I'm just tired. You're overreacting." But she wasn't fine, and we both knew it. Our daughter Lily was almost 3 weeks old. She had become the center of our world. Every little smile felt like a miracle. Every tiny yawn made us laugh. For a few moments each day, it almost felt like we were the happy family we'd always imagined. Then reality returned. One afternoon, Lily wouldn't stop crying. Emily had been trying to breastfeed her for nearly an hour. Nothing worked. Lily kept pulling away and crying even harder. Emily's hands started shaking. "I don't understand. She's still hungry." I gently picked Lily up and walked around the living room, hoping she'd calm down. Instead, she cried even louder. Emily suddenly burst into tears. "I'm failing." "No, you're not. She hates me." "Emily, she's a baby. I can't even feed my own child." She collapsed onto the couch, covering her face. I sat beside her. "We'll figure it out together." She nodded, but she looked completely defeated. The next morning, we visited the pediatrician. After weighing Lily, the doctor frowned. "She's gained some weight, but not as much as I'd like." Emily immediately looked panicked. "Is something wrong?" "Not necessarily," the doctor replied calmly. "But I'd like to ask a few questions." She asked Emily how often she was eating. Emily answered vaguely. Then the doctor asked another question. "Are you dieting?" Emily hesitated. "A little." The doctor's expression changed instantly. "You should not be restricting calories while breastfeeding." Emily looked down. "I just want to lose the pregnancy weight." "I understand that," the doctor said gently, "but right now your body needs fuel. Your baby's nutrition comes first." The room fell silent. I reached for Emily's hand. She pulled it away. The drive home was painfully quiet. When we got inside, Emily walked straight to the bedroom. A few minutes later, I heard drawers opening and closing. Then, the sound of someone crying. I found her sitting on the floor. The notebook from a few days earlier was open beside her. "I've ruined everything." "You haven't. I can't even be a good mother." I knelt beside her. "This isn't about being a good mother." "Yes, it is." "No, it's about how cruel you've been to yourself." She looked at me through tears. "You don't understand, then help me understand." She took a deep breath. "When I was growing up, my mom was obsessed with appearances." I stayed quiet. "If I gained 5 pounds, she'd notice. If my clothes looked tight, she'd tell me. If I wanted dessert," she laughed bitterly, "she'd ask whether I really needed it." My heart sank. Emily, after a while, I started hearing her voice even when she wasn't there. She pressed her hands against her temples. "Every time I look in the mirror, I hear that voice. It tells me I'm ugly. It tells me you'll leave. It tells me nobody could love someone who looks like me." I didn't know what to say. For years, I'd been fighting an enemy I couldn't even see, and she'd been fighting it alone. I wrapped my arms around her for a moment. She let herself cry, really cry. The kind of crying that comes from years of pain, not just one bad day, not just childbirth, years. "I don't want to lose you," she whispered. I held her tighter. "You won't lose me. I already pushed you away." "You did, and I'm sorry." I closed my eyes. "I know," for the first time since the hospital. It felt like we were finally telling each other the truth, but neither of us realized. The hardest test of our marriage was still waiting for us, because 2 days later, I would discover something Emily had been hiding from me for months, something that would make me question whether I truly knew my own wife at all. The secret she never meant for me to find. For the first time since Lily was born, things felt lighter, not perfect, but lighter. Emily started eating a little more after the pediatrician's appointment. She still counted calories, but not as obsessively. She even agreed to let me cook dinner a few nights a week instead of insisting she wasn't hungry. I wanted to believe we were finally moving in the right direction. Then one rainy Tuesday afternoon, everything changed again. I had left work early because one of my meetings was canceled. Emily thought I'd be home after 6. Instead, I walked through the front door just after 3. The house was quiet, too quiet. "Lily," I called. No answer. I heard Emily's voice upstairs. She wasn't talking to the baby. She was on the phone. Normally, I would have given her privacy, but then I heard my name. "I still haven't told him." I froze. There was a long pause while the person on the other end spoke. Emily sighed. "I know I should." Another pause. "No, if he finds out now, he'll think I've lied to him our entire marriage." My stomach tightened. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. "But I couldn't move. I just need a little more time," she whispered. "I'll tell him, eventually." A few seconds later, the call ended. I quietly walked back downstairs and closed the front door a little louder than before, pretending I'd just arrived. Emily came downstairs carrying Lily, smiling as if nothing had happened. "You're home early." "Yeah, everything okay? Meeting got canceled." She smiled. "That's nice." I smiled back, but inside, my mind was racing. What hadn't she told me? That evening, after Emily went to bed, I couldn't stop thinking about the phone call. Every possibility ran through my head. Was she in debt? Had she lost her job? Was she sick? Was there someone else? I hated myself for even thinking that last one. Emily had never given me a reason to doubt her loyalty, but secrets have a way of making your imagination run wild. The next morning, I decided to ask her directly. We were drinking coffee while Lily slept in her bassinet. "Can I ask you something?" She looked up. "Of course." "When I came home yesterday," she immediately tensed. "I heard part of your phone call." Her face lost all color. "You did. You said there was something you hadn't told me." She stared into her coffee. For nearly a minute, she didn't say a word. Finally, she whispered, "I was hoping you'd never hear that." "So, what is it?" Tears filled her eyes. "It's not what you think." "I don't know what to think." She nodded slowly. "I know." Then she stood up. "I need to show you something." Without another word, she walked upstairs. A minute later, she returned holding an old cardboard box. It looked worn, like it had been opened hundreds of times. She placed it gently on the dining table. "I've kept this since I was 17. My heart was pounding. She opened the box. Inside were dozens of old journals, therapy worksheets, hospital bracelets, prescription bottles with faded labels, and one thick folder. She handed it to me with trembling hands. "Read the first page." I looked down. The title read, "Psychological Evaluation, Age 17. I looked back at her. "What is this?" She took a shaky breath. "The truth." And in that moment, I realized the biggest secret in our marriage had never been about the delivery room. It had been something she'd been carrying long before she ever met me. The truth she had been carrying for years. I stared at the folder in my hands. Emily sat across from me, twisting her wedding ring over and over again. She looked terrified. "You don't have to read it if you don't want to," she said quietly. I looked at her. "I think I do." She nodded without saying another word. I opened the first page. It wasn't what I'd expected. There was no shocking secret, no affair, no hidden child. Instead, page after page described something I'd never truly understood: severe body image disorder, chronic anxiety, low self-worth. The reports were from years before we met. One sentence hit me harder than anything else. Patient believes her value depends entirely on her physical appearance and fears abandonment if her appearance changes. I read it again, then again. My chest tightened. Everything suddenly made sense. The endless diets, the panic during pregnancy, the delivery room, the notebook, even the way she'd flinch whenever I tried to compliment her. She hadn't been doubting me, she'd been doubting herself. "I stopped going to therapy after college," Emily said softly. "I thought I was better. You never told me. I was ashamed. You've never had to hide things from me." "I know, but I convinced myself that if you knew how broken I felt." She swallowed hard. "You'd eventually leave." I closed the folder. "Emily, I know it sounds ridiculous." "No, it doesn't." She looked surprised. "It sounds heartbreaking." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "I spent our entire relationship waiting for the day you'd wake up and realize you deserved someone prettier." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. 8 years together. And she'd spent every single one of them waiting to lose me. I moved closer and took her hand. "For the 100th time, I didn't marry you because you were perfect. I married you because I loved you." She smiled weakly. "But that's just it. I never believed you." Those words hurt. Not because I was angry, because I realized that no amount of reassurance could fix a wound she'd carried since she was a teenager. A few days later, we attended our first marriage counseling session. The therapist, Dr. Carter, welcomed us warmly. She listened quietly while each of us explained what had happened. When it was Emily's turn, she broke down halfway through the story. "I thought if he saw me giving birth, he'd never want me again." The room fell silent. Dr. Carter didn't look shocked. She simply nodded. "Emily's, that fear didn't begin in the delivery room. It began many years before that." Emily lowered her head. "I know." Then the therapist turned toward me. "And what did you lose that day?" I didn't answer immediately. Finally, I said, "I lost the feeling that my wife trusted me." For the first time, Emily looked directly at me. Her eyes filled with tears. "I never meant to make you feel that way." "I know, but that's how it felt." She reached across the small table and held my hand. It was the first time we'd touched like that in weeks. When the session ended, Dr. Carter gave us one assignment. No discussions about who's right or wrong this week. Instead, I want each of you to write one letter, not to defend yourselves, not to explain, just to describe how that day felt. No interruptions, no arguments, only honesty. That evening, after Lily had fallen asleep, Emily sat at the kitchen table with a notebook. I sat across from her with my own. For nearly an hour, the only sound in the house was the scratching of our pens. Neither of us knew it yet. But those 2 letters would change our marriage more than any argument ever had. The letter that changed everything. For 3 nights, neither of us read our letters. They stayed folded on the kitchen table, almost daring us to open them. Every time I walked past them, my stomach tightened. Emily looked just as nervous. Finally, on Friday evening, after Lily had fallen asleep, we sat across from each other. No television, no phones, just 2 letters. Emily pushed mine toward me. "You read yours first." I shook my head. "No, yours." She took a deep breath and unfolded the paper with trembling hands. "Dear Ryan," she began. "The day I asked you to leave the delivery room. I watched the light disappear from your face. I wanted to stop you. I wanted to tell the nurse I'd changed my mind, but I was terrified. I wasn't thinking like your wife anymore. I was thinking like the insecure 16-year-old girl who believed that if anyone saw her at her worst, they'd leave. You kept telling me I was beautiful throughout my pregnancy. I smiled every time, but inside, I thought you were only saying it because you felt sorry for me. I know that sounds irrational. It was. When the nurse closed the door behind you, I immediately regretted it, but by then, I was too ashamed to ask you to come back. You missed the moment our daughter entered the world because I trusted my fear more than I trusted the man who has loved me for 8 years. I'm sorry. Not because I made a mistake, but because I broke your heart. By the time she finished reading, she was crying so hard she couldn't continue. I quietly unfolded my own letter. Dear Emily, I wasn't angry because I missed seeing Lily born. I was angry because, for the first time in our marriage, I realized you believed strangers on the internet more than you believed me. I spent months trying to convince you that you were beautiful when you asked me to leave. It felt like every word I'd ever spoken meant nothing. I sat outside that delivery room wondering if I'd failed you as a husband. I kept asking myself what I'd done wrong. The hardest part wasn't missing our daughter's first cry. It was believing that the woman I loved didn't feel safe enough to let me stay. I don't need a perfect wife. I never did. I just wanted to be your partner. When I looked up, Emily had covered her mouth with both hands. She walked around the table and wrapped her arms around me. For the first time in what felt like forever, we cried together. Over the next few weeks, counseling slowly started helping. Not because our problems disappeared, because we finally stopped pretending they didn't exist. Emily began seeing an individual therapist again. She deleted every social media account that constantly made her compare herself to other women. She even threw away the diet pills she'd been hiding. It wasn't a miracle. Some days were still hard. Some mornings she'd stand in front of the mirror and cry. Other days she'd laugh while playing with Lily and forget about her appearance completely. Recovery wasn't a straight line. It never is. One evening, about 2 months later, Emily looked at me while we were washing dishes. Can I ask you something? Always, if we ever have another baby. My heart skipped. She looked down at the sink. I still don't know if I could let you be in the delivery room. The words hit me like a punch. She quickly added, it's not because I don't love you. It's because I don't know if I'll ever completely beat that fear. I stood there silently. Part of me understood. Another part of me felt the old wound opening again. That night, after Emily had gone to bed, I sat alone in the living room. I realized something painful. Love wasn't the problem anymore. We loved each other deeply. The real question was whether love alone would be enough to heal years of fear and broken trust. And for the first time, I honestly didn't know the answer. The hardest decision we ever made. A week after that conversation, we walked into another counseling session. Neither of us had spoken much during the drive. The silence wasn't filled with anger anymore. It was filled with uncertainty. Dr. Carter looked at both of us before speaking. You've made progress, she said. But progress doesn't always mean the pain is gone. Neither of us argued. She was right. Halfway through the session, she asked us a question. If nothing changes from this point forward, can you still imagine spending the rest of your lives together? The room became completely silent. Emily stared at the floor. I stared at the wall. Finally, I answered, I love her. Emily nodded. I love him too. Dr. Carter smiled gently. I didn't ask whether you love each other. I asked whether you can live with the relationship exactly as it is today. That question hit us both harder than anything we'd discussed before. Because the answer was no, on the drive home, Emily finally spoke. I think we need some space. I kept my eyes on the road. What kind of space? I don't know. A few weeks, maybe a month. The words hurt, but I understood why she was saying them. We weren't healing. We were exhausting each other. I don't want a divorce, she whispered. Neither do I just don't know how to fix us while we're hurting each other every day. I nodded slowly. Maybe you're right. The following weekend, Emily packed a small suitcase. She wasn't leaving forever. She was going to stay with her older sister for a while. Before she walked out the door, she knelt beside Lily's crib. She kissed our daughter's forehead and started crying. I'll see you in a couple of days, sweetheart. We had agreed to share parenting equally. No matter what happened between us, Lily would never feel caught in the middle. When Emily finally looked at me, neither of us knew what to say. After a long silence, she stepped closer. I'm sorry, I know, I never wanted us to end up here. I know, she reached for my hand. For a moment we just stood there, two people who still loved each other, but didn't know how to stop hurting one another. Then she picked up her suitcase and walked out the front door. The sound of it closing echoed through the house. It was the loneliest sound I'd ever heard. The first week without Emily felt strange. The house was quieter. When Lily stayed with me, I poured everything I had into being the best father I could be. When she stayed with Emily, the silence became almost unbearable. I realized how much of my life had revolved around my family. One evening, while cleaning the nursery, I found a small envelope tucked behind a picture frame. My name was written on the front, Ryan. Inside was a short note in Emily's handwriting. If you're reading this, it means I've finally accepted that I can't keep pretending I'm okay. Please don't think you failed me. You loved me better than I ever loved myself. That's something I'll always be grateful for, whether we find our way back to each other or not. Thank you for giving me Lily. By the time I finished reading, I couldn't see the words anymore. My eyes were full of tears. For the first time since all of this began, I realized something important. This had never been a story about one day in a hospital. It was a story about two people trying to fight wounds that neither of them had created, and maybe, just maybe, those wounds didn't have to define the rest of our lives. A few days later, my phone rang. It was Emily. Her voice was calm. Can we meet tomorrow? Of course. I think I'm finally ready to tell you what I've decided. I barely slept that night. Because deep down, I knew that one conversation would decide whether our marriage had a future. The choice that saved us. I barely slept the night before meeting Emily. My mind kept jumping between hope and fear. One minute I was convinced she'd ask for a divorce. The next, I imagined us somehow finding our way back to each other. The waiting was worse than knowing. The next afternoon, we met at the same little coffee shop where we'd had our first date 9 years earlier. Neither of us had planned it. Emily simply texted me the address. When I walked in, she was already there, no makeup, hair tied back, a cup of untouched coffee sitting in front of her. She smiled when she saw me. It was small, but it was real. I wasn't sure you'd come, she admitted. I told you I would, she nodded. I know. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. Finally, Emily slid a folded piece of paper across the table. I wrote something, I smiled. Another letter, she laughed quietly. I guess we're getting good at those. I unfolded it. It wasn't long. Ryan, for most of my life, I've believed that people only loved me because of how I looked. When I became pregnant, I felt like I was losing the only thing that made me worthy of love. So I pushed away the one person who had spent years proving that wasn't true. I can't change what happened in the delivery room. I can't give you that moment back, but I can spend the rest of my life making sure fear never makes another decision for our family. I'm choosing therapy. I'm choosing honesty. And if you'll still have me, I'm choosing us. By the time I reached the last line, my hands were shaking. I looked up. Emily was crying. So, she whispered, what happens now? I reached across the table and took her hand. We stop trying to erase the past, she nodded. And we start building something better. She squeezed my hand. I can do that. So can I. Over the next year, things didn't magically become perfect. Emily continued individual therapy every week. We stayed in marriage counseling for almost 8 months. There were setbacks. Some mornings she still stood in front of the mirror a little too long. Sometimes I still thought about the delivery room. The pain didn't disappear overnight, but it stopped controlling our lives. Slowly, trust returned, not because either of us forgot what happened. Because we chose, every single day, to be honest instead of afraid. Lily celebrated her first birthday surrounded by family. As I watched her smash birthday cake all over her face, Emily started laughing so hard that tears rolled down her cheeks. She looked at me. You know what's funny? What? A year ago I would have worried about how I looked in every photo, and today, she smiled. Today I was too busy making memories to care. I leaned over and kissed her forehead. I'm proud of you. For the first time, she didn't argue. She simply smiled and whispered, thank you. It's been almost 3 years since the day our daughter was born. People sometimes ask if I ever got over missing the birth. The honest answer is, not completely. There are moments you never get back, but I finally realized something. The most important moment wasn't the one I missed. It was every moment that came after. Watching Lily take her first steps, reading bedtime stories, teaching her to ride a bike, watching her run into my arms after work, those are the memories that define fatherhood. Not a single hour in a hospital. As for Emily, she still has difficult days. Healing isn't a finish line, it's something she works on every day. But today, she believes me when I tell her she's beautiful, not because of the mirror, not because of anyone else's opinion, but because she's finally beginning to see herself the way I always saw her, and if we ever have another child, I honestly don't know what she'll decide about the delivery room. What I do know is this: whatever happens, we'll make that decision together, not out of fear, but out of trust. Looking back now, I don't think either of us was the villain. We were just two exhausted new parents carrying wounds we didn't fully understand, and sometimes, love isn't about never hurting each other, it's about choosing to heal together after you do.